The first time my brother asked me to sign a few papers, I honestly believed he was trying to help. We had buried Grandpa Arthur only 4 days earlier. The grief was still fresh. His favorite chair remained empty. His reading glasses still rested on the table beside the living room window. Every corner of his penthouse reminded me of him. For 26 years, that apartment had been more than an expensive home. It had been where birthdays were celebrated, where Christmas dinners stretched late into the night, where Grandpa patiently taught me chess, financial responsibility, and one lesson he repeated more than any other. Character is measured by what people do when money enters the room. At the time, I thought he was simply sharing another life lesson. Years later, I realized he had been preparing me for my own family. My name is Olivia Bennett. I was 29 years old and worked as an interior designer. My grandfather wasn't a billionaire, but he had built an incredibly successful commercial real estate company from nothing. By the time he retired, his investments had grown into a substantial fortune. Despite his wealth, he lived surprisingly simply. He drove the same old sedan for nearly 15 years. He wore inexpensive sweaters. He never cared about luxury watches or designer clothes. The only thing he truly loved was the penthouse overlooking Harbor Bay. It wasn't valuable because of its marble floors or panoramic skyline. It was valuable because every room carried memories. Sunday breakfasts on the balcony, movie nights during thunderstorms, countless afternoons spent helping me with homework after school. When my parents divorced, Grandpa quietly became the steady presence in my life. He never criticized either parent. He simply made sure I never felt alone. Meanwhile, my relationship with the rest of the family was complicated. My older brother, Daniel, always believed Grandpa favored me. He wasn't entirely wrong, but the reason had nothing to do with money. While everyone else visited Grandpa on holidays, I stopped by every week. Not because I expected anything, because I genuinely enjoyed spending time with him. Sometimes we'd spend hours talking. Other days we'd barely speak at all. He'd read his newspaper while I rearranged bookshelves or watered plants. Our silence never felt uncomfortable. It felt like home. My mother often joked, "You spend more time with your grandfather than your own family." I always smiled. "He listens." She laughed. "That's because he spoils you." Maybe she believed that. She never noticed that Grandpa rarely bought me expensive gifts. Instead, he gave me books, advice, time, things that couldn't be wrapped in shiny paper. About 2 years before he passed away, Grandpa began slowing down. His heart wasn't as strong as it once had been. Walking long distances exhausted him. So every Saturday, I brought groceries, cooked lunch, organized his medications. Sometimes we simply sat together watching boats move across the harbor. One afternoon, he looked at me thoughtfully. "Do you know why I built this company?" I shrugged. "To become successful?" He smiled. "No. I built it because I grew up believing security was something only rich people deserved." He looked out the window. "I wanted my family to never fear losing their home." Then he added something I never forgot. "The strange thing about money is that it often reveals people more than it changes them." I didn't fully understand. Not then. 3 months later, Grandpa passed away peacefully in his sleep. The funeral brought together relatives I hadn't seen in years. Everyone spoke lovingly about him. Everyone shared stories. Everyone cried. For a little while, grief seemed stronger than greed. That illusion lasted exactly 48 hours. The reading of the will took place inside the office of Grandpa's longtime attorney. Mr. Collins had represented him for almost 30 years. He knew our family well. As he carefully explained each section of the estate, everyone remained polite. Until he reached the final property. The Harbor Bay penthouse shall pass solely to my granddaughter, Olivia Bennett. Silence. Complete silence. Then Daniel laughed. "Nice joke." Mr. Collins adjusted his glasses. "It isn't a joke." Mom leaned forward. "There must be another page." "There isn't. But Father always said everything would be shared equally." Mr. Collins calmly opened another envelope. This handwritten letter was left specifically for Olivia. I unfolded it carefully. "My dear Olivia, if you're reading this, I've finally gone where every old man eventually goes. Don't cry too long. I'd rather be remembered with laughter." I smiled despite the tears. The letter continued. "This apartment belongs to you because you filled it with life. Not because you asked for it. Not because you expected it. Because you made an old man feel less lonely." By the time I finished reading, I could barely see through my tears. The room, however, felt noticeably colder. Daniel's jaw tightened. Mom avoided looking at me. No one congratulated me. No one mentioned Grandpa's wishes. Instead, conversations immediately turned toward property values, tax estimates, potential buyers, investment opportunities. That evening, Daniel called. I've already spoken with a real estate broker. I'm not selling. You haven't thought it through. I have. You owe the family. I quietly answered. I don't owe anyone something Grandpa freely chose to give me. The next morning, my aunt appeared unexpectedly at my apartment. She carried homemade cookies. For 10 pleasant minutes, we talked about Grandpa. Then she sighed. You know, keeping the penthouse will divide this family. I looked at her carefully. Or maybe trying to take it will. She didn't answer. By the end of the week, the pressure had become relentless. Calls, messages, unexpected visits. Every conversation ended the same way. Just sign. Finally, Daniel invited me to what he described as a private family meeting. The moment I entered the conference room and saw attorneys, prepared contracts, and transfer documents already waiting on the table, I realized this had never been a family conversation. It was an ambush. Daniel slowly pushed the papers toward me. His voice was calm, cold, confident. Sign the transfer, or I'll drag this out for years. I looked down at the signature line. Then I remembered Grandpa's final lesson. Money doesn't create character. It reveals it. And in that room, every mask had finally fallen away. The conference room became completely silent after Daniel finished speaking. Sign the transfer, or I'll drag this out for years. His attorney quietly folded his hands. My mother stared at the documents without looking at me. For a moment, I considered how strange the situation was. We had buried Grandpa only a week earlier. Instead of sharing memories, we were fighting over square footage and market value. I slowly closed the folder. No, Daniel leaned back in his chair. You don't understand how expensive court can become. I understand perfectly. I'm still not signing. His smile disappeared. Fine. We'll challenge Grandpa's mental capacity. The words shocked everyone in the room. Even the attorney beside him looked uncomfortable. I stood. If that's your decision, I'll let the court hear Grandpa's own words. Daniel frowned. What are you talking about? I'll let my lawyer explain. Without another sentence, I walked out. Instead of going home, I drove directly to the office of Mr. Collins, Grandpa's longtime attorney. When I arrived, he seemed almost unsurprised. I've been expecting you. I think Grandpa was expecting this too. He opened a locked filing cabinet and removed a sealed envelope marked with my name. Across the front, Grandpa had written, "Open only if anyone pressures Olivia to surrender the penthouse." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was another handwritten letter. My dear Olivia, if this letter has been opened, it means something I feared has happened. Someone has mistaken my kindness for weakness. The next page contained something even more surprising. Grandpa had arranged for a professional video recording 6 months before his death. Mr. Collins inserted a flash drive into his computer. Grandpa appeared on the screen, smiling exactly as I remembered him. If anyone claims I wasn't of sound mind, this recording is my answer. He laughed softly. I know exactly what I'm doing. I've chosen Olivia because she never treated this apartment like an investment. She treated it like home. He looked directly into the camera. If any member of my family contests this gift out of greed, that person's inheritance from my remaining personal investment account shall immediately be donated to the Children's Housing Foundation. I stared in disbelief. There was another account. Mr. Collins nodded. Approximately $12 million. I looked up. So if they challenge the will, they lose that inheritance entirely. I finally understood why Grandpa had smiled every time he said, "Always think 3 moves ahead." A week later, Daniel officially filed his legal challenge anyway. He believed Grandpa was bluffing. The first court hearing lasted less than 40 minutes. Daniel's attorney argued that an elderly man could have been manipulated. Mr. Collins calmly presented Grandpa's medical evaluations. Every doctor confirmed Grandpa had been mentally competent. Then the judge watched Grandpa's recorded statement. When the video ended, the courtroom remained silent. Finally, the judge looked toward Daniel. Your grandfather anticipated this exact argument. The case was dismissed. Because the challenge had officially been filed, the penalty clause immediately became active. Daniel, my mother, my aunt, every relative who had joined the legal action lost their share of Grandpa's remaining investment account. $12 million was transferred exactly as Grandpa instructed, to a charitable foundation that built affordable housing for families with seriously ill children. When the news reached my relatives, the phone calls began almost immediately. Daniel shouted, "You planned this." "No. Grandpa did." Mom cried over the phone. "We didn't think he was serious." "I know." There was a long silence. Then I quietly added, "Neither did you think I would refuse to be bullied." Weeks passed. The anger slowly disappeared. Reality replaced it. One afternoon, my mother unexpectedly visited the penthouse. She looked exhausted. Older somehow. "I'd like to come in." I invited her inside. She slowly walked through the living room, touching familiar furniture. Finally, she stopped beside Grandpa's favorite balcony. "I've been angry." She looked down. "But not because of the apartment." I remained silent. She continued, "I was jealous." Those words surprised me. "Jealous? You spent time with your grandfather that I never made time for." I kept thinking there would always be another weekend. Another visit. There wasn't. Tears rolled down her face. I blamed the inheritance because admitting my own regret hurt too much. For the first time since Grandpa's funeral, I hugged my mother. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Sometimes silence says everything. Months later, I made an important decision. I kept the penthouse exactly as Grandpa had left it. I didn't sell it. I didn't renovate it. Instead, I turned part of it into a mentorship space where young interior design students could meet experienced architects, designers, and craftspeople for free workshops. On the wall near Grandpa's old reading chair, I framed one sentence from his letter. "Character is measured by what people do when money enters the room." Every student who visited asked about it. Every time I smiled. It's the most valuable inheritance I received. Nearly a year later, Daniel asked if we could have lunch. He looked different, less arrogant, more thoughtful. "I owe you an apology." I nodded but said nothing. I convinced myself I deserved the apartment because I was the oldest. He sighed. "The truth is, I hadn't visited Grandpa alone in almost 4 years." He looked down at his coffee. "You earned his trust." I expected his money. There was nothing left to argue about. We shook hands. Slowly, our relationship began to heal. Looking back, people often focused on the $5.5 million penthouse because it sounded like the biggest part of the story. It wasn't. The real inheritance wasn't marble floors, panoramic windows, or a luxury address. It was the wisdom Grandpa left behind. He knew wealth could divide people if they valued possessions more than relationships. So he created a plan that protected both his final wishes and the granddaughter who had simply loved him without expecting anything in return. In the end, no courtroom decided who deserved the penthouse. Grandpa had already made that decision long before anyone sat down at the conference table. The court simply honored the choice of a man who understood that true wealth isn't measured by what you leave behind. It's measured by the values you leave within the people you love.